Hello, HopeQuest family. Troy and Melissa here, and as always, we're incredibly grateful that you hang out with us here at Hope for today. We are not quarantined.
We are
We
not.
are in our house,
Thank
but
you, Jesus.
we're about to head into the office. Things at HopeQuest are still rolling along in spite of this unprecedented and just kind of unbelievable
Yeah.
scenario we're kind of living through. And we wanted to talk today to you about how to stay safe, but more importantly, sober during the coronavirus. And a lot of folks have been calling, asking, emailing, how are things at HopeQuest? Are you still open? The residential program is absolutely open. We've got guys in all three residences, and I've got a new client coming today, a new client coming tomorrow, and I think a new client coming next week. So the bottom line is the ministry at HopeQuest is still continuing because addiction doesn't care about coronavirus. Addiction doesn't stop. Addiction doesn't quarantine itself. It's our job to quarantine addiction. Another lesson maybe for another day. But a lot of folks have asked, how can we help HopeQuest right now? And I want you to know that you can pray for HopeQuest. You can pray for the clients that got us in our way. You can pray for the staff members. You can pray for safety, and you can just pray that God would continue to do the transforming work that only God can do. You can go to our website and see our specific coronavirus response, so you know exactly what we're doing and what's going on and how we're keeping the clients safe. The Journey Retreat's been canceled. The Walking Free Retreat is on hold. We'll make a decision in a few weeks on that. All Walking Free and Journey groups have moved to some sort of an online option. We're not meeting face-to-face for any of our support groups, really probably anywhere in the country. Those groups have all been moved to an online option. So we appreciate your prayers, and just know that, your prayers matter a lot to us. Also, folks have asked, does HopeQuest need anything right now? Other than prayers, donations would be a huge help. Times like these, the economics of all this are really unknown and uncertain, but we can't just shut things down. We can't just close like a restaurant or a bar. We've got to keep rolling, and we could use your help. And so we'd be grateful for your prayers, your donations, anything you can do. Drop us a line, we'll tell you more. But let's move on to, Melissa, how we can stay safe and, more importantly, sober during this coronavirus craziness. For starters, Melissa, you got a call yesterday or day before from a friend of yours. What was that friend kind of sharing about her battle with addiction and this whole coronavirus thing?
We were just talking about her anxiety about, she said, Melissa, I don't know if I can maintain my recovery. It seems like all of my support systems are being pulled out from underneath me. And there's a ton of anxiety going on. So, we know in what we do that anxiety and isolation are actually two of the biggest threats to recovery. And so that presents a unique challenge in this environment we're living in right now.
Right. And the interesting thing about coronavirus and addiction is not unlike coronavirus. There's a lot of similarities. And here's what I mean by that. You don't ask for addiction. We didn't invite coronavirus to come. It just came, and we have to deal with it. We can't ignore it. It attacks you when you are least prepared. It loves to exploit weakness. It loves to exploit things when you're not ready. It loves to wreak havoc. And then here's another huge similarity between coronavirus and addiction. It requires relationships and cooperation to defeat. You cannot overcome either of these things, addiction or coronavirus, without relationships and without working together and supporting one another. And finally, the other similarity that, I'm not a fan of addiction. I don't like addiction. I don't appreciate the fact that I struggle with addiction. I've seen addiction do horrible things in my life and the lives of others. I'm not a fan of coronavirus either.
Nor am I.
I just wish it would go away. But the reality is this. Coronavirus and addiction give us an opportunity to trust God, an opportunity to learn how to surrender when things don't make sense or when I feel threatened or overwhelmed. So remember, this is an opportunity for us to press into what matters, to press into trusting God and depending upon Him, and really good things can come out of this crazy, crazy time.
Absolutely.
So, Melissa, let's talk then about how can we manage things during this unprecedented time. You already mentioned these triggers of anxiety and isolation. So in facing these two triggers in particular, how can we be sure to avoid relapse and to keep ourselves not just safe but sober? You talked about, Melissa, two things: an attitude that we have to have and some actions we need to take. So start us off with the attitude that we have to have, that mindset that allows us to stay safe and sober.
So, I think people in the recovery community actually have an advantage over normal day-to-day people who have really haven't been up against feeling powerless so much. I mean, what do we say in recovery? We admit we're powerless over coronavirus and its impact on the world and the craziness around us, and life has become unmanageable. And that's the first principle of recovery. So all of us, that's a no-brainer. We know that already. We're powerless. We admit that there has to be something outside of ourselves to intervene, and then we entrust ourselves to God in this very difficult time. So when I think about the attitude that we already have in recovery, I think it gives us an advantage over people who don't understand feeling powerless or haven't actually done work around that in their own lives.
So as we feel powerless up against coronavirus and powerless up against our addiction, we can kind of lean into trusting God, and we can choose to kind of turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Third step there.
Right, absolutely.
And the reality is this: we need to trust something bigger than ourselves. And that's something, yes, the government is giving us direction, and scientists and medical professionals are giving us information, but ultimately our lives are in the hands of God, and we're gonna listen to that medical advice. We're gonna follow the government's direction, but our lives are in the hands of God, and we're going to put our trust there. We're going to trust that something bigger than us, God Himself, will take care of us, will guide us, and will actually do good things in our heart during this time. I know one of the things, we were doing a Zoom meeting 2 days ago for our Walking Free Woodstock group. And it was really cool just to see all those guys together in that format, still coming together and keeping that attitude of we need one another, we need to band together. And so that attitude that we need to have, the same attitude we have as we face addiction is the same attitude that we have as we face coronavirus. And we're going to trust God and recognize and surrender our powerlessness. And so that leads us now to actions, Melissa. What actions do we need to take? Because you can't just sit there and do nothing.
That's right. Just like recovery, there are wise things that we can do during this time. So as I'm just thinking about some of the challenges that we have, I think one of the really important things for people in recovery is to maintain some kind of structure. I know a lot of us are working from home or are in a different environment than we normally in. Our routines are off, and especially for those in recovery, we depend on those routines to kind of keep us on track in our lives.
Yeah, the structure in my recovery keeps me safe and keeps me grounded and keeps me going in a predictable direction.
Absolutely. And so with those changes, just like going on a vacation or any other kind of thing that takes you out of your structure or your routine, you have to be very intentional. Right. So create structure, maintain some kind of structure in your life so that there are predictable check-in places for you within yourself and God, and times you just check in with how you're doing and with other people, maintaining some sense of structure, purpose, significance, all those things that you do as a part of your recovery.
So kind of laying around all day in the pajamas and watching Netflix and just kind of doing whatever, maybe not a good idea.
Not okay.
So maintain structure in our day. That's the first action step. What's number 2?
The second thing is, if you do have extra time because of these changes, invest it in your recovery.
That's a great idea. So invest that extra time that I have.
Absolutely. So read books that have been on your shelf or your to-read list, in terms of your own spiritual growth, emotional growth, recovery growth. Listen to podcasts. Take time to invest in relationships with your family members, your kids, your wife, if you're married, just so that you are investing any extra time in a strategic way.
Right. So taking that time and kind of, I guess it would be fair to say, using that time for something good to help me grow and to help me kind of stay grounded and to make sure I'm moving in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what's number 3?
So the third thing I would say is limit the amount of time you are watching the news. For those of us who struggle with anxiety, the world is in a panic.
Yes.
Right. Everyone is catastrophizing. And while it's okay and valid to recognize that this is a dangerous situation, it's also not a time to completely panic and to be in fight or flight. So limit the amount of time you spend soaking in all the fear around you, because fear is contagious.
And for me, it's been especially challenging because part of my daily routine is to check sports scores. And to check the news. And there's no sports, and the news is all coronavirus. And so for me, it has been helpful to set that kind of piece of my routine aside and to spend some extra time in my time with God. So I like that. So you're suggesting not stay informed, but don't just watch 24/7.
Right.
Don't obsess.
Don't obsess.
Gotcha. What's number next?
So the next thing I would say is know your weaknesses and your triggers and set extra boundaries around those. So guys, gals, if you're struggling with pornography addiction, now is a time where it's really important to set healthy boundaries around technology, because everyone is having to use technology to connect.
Right.
And so be mindful of that. Be mindful that it's a really slippery slope. Maintain your normal routines. Go to bed at the normal time. Don't stay up all night watching things. So if you tend to get really anxious in the evenings and you're used to going to your support groups to manage through that, anxiety, fears, discouragement, whatever emotion is up and running in your life, then make sure you're connecting. Text message, group messages, calling a friend, doing some wise one-on-one, face-to-face meetings. So just be careful to set extra boundaries, tighten up your recovery boundaries during this time when emotions are running high and there's a lot of change.
Great idea. What's next?
And then I would say be creative about staying connected. You know me, technology's of the devil. I've always said that. If you've been around me, I say Facebook's of the devil, Instagram's of the devil, all of it. And so it's challenging for me to be able to get outside of my box and say, okay, how am I going to use technology for good instead of evil? And to stay connected to the people in my life, to have those connections I'm so dependent on for just maintaining my sanity and proper thoughts about my recovery.
Right. I think what we can do is recognize that there's a lot of opportunity for evil. There's a lot of opportunity for missteps during a time like this, but there's also an opportunity to do good. I have an idea, sweetheart.
What?
Maybe we could do Facebook Live.
That's awesome.
So, if you'd like to see Melissa on Facebook Live,
goodness.
drop me a note, maybe comment below on this YouTube video, or drop me a note and say, love to see Melissa on Facebook Live. And Melissa and I will do a Facebook Live. If enough folks reach out and say, hey, we'd love to join you guys on a Facebook Live, we'll do a Facebook Live about how coronavirus and recovery is impacting our marriage. How about that? Facebook Live. So drop us a note and let us know if you'd like to do that. The last thing, Melissa, and I appreciate you kind of letting this be the last, is to love others well.
Yeah.
Talk about what you mean by that.
So often in recovery, what really sets us up for failure is turning our focus inward on ourselves, the things that we don't have, the things that we're missing, the inconveniences, the disappointments, the fears, the anxieties. And so if we can remember that we don't stop being God's people just because there's a pandemic. We don't stop being light. There are great opportunities to love others well and minister if we can stay calm and present. And as I'm just thinking about turning my focus towards others, how can I love you well?
Right.
I mean, it's a stressful time for Hope Quest, and navigating everyone's safety, and that burden falls on you and the leadership of our team. How can I love you well in that? How can I love people that I know are really struggling with anxiety or fears around this? So don't miss this opportunity to actually be light in a really fearful, panic-stricken world.
And the reality is that we have the opportunity to reach out and connect. Isolation is dangerous. Addiction flourishes in isolation. So the very thing, this whole social distancing thing that we're being told is the key to stopping coronavirus, puts us in a vulnerable spot of isolation. And by actually turning that focus off of yourself and off of feeling isolated and alone, you can turn that and you can reach out to others. You can make phone calls. You can send text messages. You can join. We're going to do a Walking Free Zoom group tomorrow night. And Melissa's going to perhaps do a Facebook Live. You can reach out to your small group and suggest, hey, let's do a Google Hangout or let's do a Zoom meeting to get together other people and encourage them and love on them. And the Bible tells us that we can and should encourage one another as long as it's called today. This is an opportunity to do that. You have an opportunity not just to sit there and be isolated and afraid and overwhelmed and turn things inward and turn to old, unhealthy, sinful coping strategies, but you have the opportunity to turn towards others and to reach out and to love them and to listen to them and encourage them. I appreciate you mentioning the fact that you want to love me well, because I need
You need
love.
to be loved well.
I do, and maybe a
back rub
thrown in there
right,
would be
something
great,
like that.
something like that. But the bottom line is, addiction and times of craziness like now are hard on marriages and they're hard on relationships. And so we should be especially mindful to love on our spouses and our families well, to take care of this relationship. The two relationships that will get you through this time are your relationship with God and your closest relationships in your life. So guard those relationships, nurture those relationships, don't isolate, but sow into those relationships love and listening and patience and encouragement. And together, we'll make it through this. And so just remember that, if nothing else, together we can make it through this time. Together we can find hope. Thanks so much for joining us. If you would like or share this video, if you would take this video and pass it on via text message or email to someone that you might think would be encouraged by this, the things that we've talked about today. And please, please, please pray for Hope Quest, pray for our clients, pray for our staff, and we are so incredibly grateful for you. Thanks. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.